Clearly today we're in an environment that is much more, has many more moving parts and technologies and platforms than ever before. But I want to take you back a bit, roughly 10 years-ish. That was sort of the height of consolidation in our industry. .NET and Java largely ruled most of the enterprise. Most of the interop between .NET and Java was already resolved. And for the most part, you could go into an environment knowing that the different beats are really going to be able to talk to each other. And we could focus more on the business problem side of things than making sure that all of the different technologies talk to each other. Unfortunately, since then, there's been a period of decentralization. As many of the thought leadership that used to exist in Java moved on, and then we got Ruby and NoSQL, and there's this stuff called REST you might have heard of. REST is colloquially called something I hacked together over HTTP that might or might not work with something that you hacked together over HTTP. So the whole idea that everybody speaks HTTP is sort of, it underplays the reality of what is done in the name of REST. So, for example, what serialization model are you using on top of HTTP? Well, clearly everybody uses JSON. Have you ever had a problem where your JSON serializer wouldn't speak to somebody else's JSON serializer? Yes, hands are going up around that. But everything's JSON. It should just work out of the box, right? Then there's NoSQL. NoSQL is a fancy way of saying none of your reporting systems will actually work on top of this data model. So you're going to have to reinvent all of the reporting in order to support this NoSQL. Isn't it great that MongoDB is web scale and all that kind of stuff? So I don't want to paint too grim a picture, but the silver lining is that it's going to be a good 5 or 10 years more of decentralization that's happening. You mentioned Elixir and Erlang, and kind of the old is being reinvented as the new, and all of this stuff, it's making its way into more and more systems. We have a good 5 or 10 more years of creating bigger and bigger, more distributed technological messes before somebody's going to say, okay, this is just insane, and we need to do some standardization. And then it'll take another 20 years from that point until we get back to where we were in 2005. So good news is job security for everybody. All right? If you're in IT, there will be need for custom software and integration between all of these pieces for the foreseeable 30, 40 years. So until we retire, we're sorted out. The generation behind us, well, the quantum computing will solve everything at that point in time, and AI, and yada, yada, yada. So it's going to get worse technologically before it gets better. I mentioned the clouds before. What's so great about the clouds? AWS and Azure, all of their services are incompatible with each other, so you actually have to custom build something if you want to move it from one cloud to the next. Google obviously has its cloud, and there are a whole bunch of other IBM clouds and Dell EMC clouds and whatnot, and there's the Open Cloud Initiative. Anytime you hear the word open, that's a clear indication will not interoperate with anything outside of this initiative. All right? It's open, so it can interoperate with anything, which means it doesn't out of the box. All right? Some other words about integration for those of you in various industries. There have been a couple of initiatives that have been sort of vertical industry specific to solve more business integration problems. I think, did anybody mention insurance? Anybody in insurance? I heard mortgages. I think that. So in there's the Accord standard for structuring data. I don't think I ever heard healthcare. There's HL7. In retail, there's GS1. In HR, there's HRXML. Every industry has their own standard. And the great thing about every standard that's been created is there's a certain area that's been left for extensibility, which is a fancy way of saying that anybody who needs to do something that's a little bit different from the standard, which is everybody, is going to pile on into that section of the protocol that isn't fixed. which is why one HL7 message is not compatible with another one, and one GS1 message is not compatible with another one, and why you have different versions of these specs that aren't compatible with each other. So even if you're in an industry that has these type of standards, the good news is there will still be integration work for years to come.
Hi, I'm Udi Dahan. I hope you're enjoying these clips on the fallacies of distributed computing. Click on the left to watch the next video, or on the right to go to the fallacies playlist, or in the middle to subscribe to our channel. For more information, including the full videos from my course, check out the links below the video. Thanks, and see you next time.